Hello, friends, and welcome once again to Orange Weekly, presented by Krause Health. For those of you that are watching us live here on our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page and on Facebook, we welcome you, and we do this every Thursday about 1 o'clock or so. If you're watching later on sometime in the future on YouTube, we appreciate that. We pop up the YouTube video of this show just in case you miss it. You can find it automatically on our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page and on syracuse.com and our social media channels as well. Make sure you're following at SYR Football on Twitter for all the latest. Pleased to welcome my friend and colleague Mike Curtis back into the fold. Remember, Mike and I did some post-game shows and some fun things and Orange Weekly and all kinds of stuff last year, and I got sick of that Nate Mink guy, Mike. We got to bring in some fresh blood here, get a fresh perspective on how things are going. Good to see you again, man.
Appreciate it, man. It's good to be back. I know this is my first Orange Weekly for football season ever since last year, and it's much different now because we're so used to doing everything in person now. So kind of going back to this Zoom format is kind of interesting.
And we're live. A big difference from last year as well, right? So we're having some fun that way. Make sure you give us your comments, and Mike and I would be happy to respond to those, answer any questions you have, and just have some fun and talk some Syracuse football here as we go. And Mike, always something going on in the world of college sports, right? You know, enjoying a nice lazy Sunday. It was my daughter's birthday last Sunday, and just kind of hanging out, and it comes across I was about to say the wire. That's an old guy speaking there. You know, the current wire is Twitter.
Sports Center ticker.
Yes, the old ticker, right? But the version of that is Twitter, of course. And Taj Harris decides that he is going to enter the transfer portal. And I guess we're getting used to this, Mike, that players have this freedom. But most of these transactions take place after the season, right? When Syracuse lost players on the basketball front to the transfer portal, they all happen, some of them relatively quickly after the season, but it was after the season. So it's kind of startling that not only a player enters the portal 4-5 games into the season, but the level of player in Taj Harris. And you wrote about this on syracuse.com Thursday. So I posed that question to you, Mike. What's the plan going forward without Syracuse's number one target?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Losing Taj Harris is a big loss for any team. He's an all ACC caliber player. He was poised to break a lot of records at the wide receiver position this year. Dino Babers put it out there pretty much before the season started. He said he expected him to break records, and it hasn't manifested that way. I think he broke or maybe moved up in position during the first game in Ohio in receptions. But ever since then, it's kind of been a little quiet. And when he sat out the game against Albany, that's when you started to think, okay, what's going on with Taj? Because we were told that it was it was injury related, but that it was minor. And then he didn't make the trip to Florida State. So now we're seeing what's going on. And then we get the news about him transferring, and it's like, okay, so now who's up next? Do you go to Anthony Quealy? I think that's a prime option. I think he has the ability to play there in the slot. Do you go to Courtney Jackson? He was moved up on the depth chart, so he's third on the wide receivers, along with Sherrod Johnson. One guy that I want to keep an eye on is Damian Alford.
Yeah.
I think he has the ability to be that deep threat. We saw in the Albany game that he was able to get that 73-yard touchdown that Tommy DeVito threw to him. And he's a big body. He's 6'6". He can go up there and catch it. So I think he's gonna have a good opportunity to go out there and make an impact.
Well, Mike, that's the thing. When you say keep an eye on him, that's not hard to do because he's a big target. When he walks on that field, you can't miss him, right? And Aronde Gatson, the second, is the same. Where you got to be careful, though, of course, is they're freshmen. They're just a few games into the season. Not everybody comes right out of the box ready to go here. But look, if Garrett Schrader is going to get a passing game going here, he's got to find a rhythm with one of these guys. And Quealy, or more than one if he wishes, but it feels like there's always a number one target that a quarterback settles on, right? And clearly with Tommy DeVito, it was Taj Harris. So Taj moves on. And as Alan says here in the comments, he knew he wasn't going to get the ball. And maybe that's it, Mike. Maybe he just kind of saw the new direction of the offense. He's thinking about the NFL. He's thinking about what's best for him. He's got the parachute to jump, and he goes. There certainly could be other options available to him, or reasons, I should say, as to why he's leaving. You never know what's truly going on behind the scenes. But you brought up Anthony Quealy, and I think he has just been on the verge there. I think you wrote this, Mike, that he's had a couple touchdowns taken away this year because of penalties. His numbers should be better. He had that great touchdown from Schrader a week ago against Florida State. I think he is ready to essentially be the number one target. Is he's going to be as good as Taj? Time will tell there, but I feel like he's certainly the best candidate for the next man up, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's basically his job to lose, or his opportunity, his snaps, his target number to lose. He's probably going to get as many as Schrader can get to him. And he has the ability to catch the deep ball. We saw that he had that big touchdown against Florida State last week that brought them within 3 points. Personally, I know he isn't a wide receiver, but I think it's kind of interesting that Sean Tucker leads the team in receiving yards.
That's right.
We know in these past couple games he's had, and the reason why he has that high number of receiving yards is because of those screen passes. They did a really good job earlier on in the season getting him those short screen passes, and he just using his body and speed to go up and avoid defenders. And he had a lot of yards coming from those plays. So it'll be interesting to see if they go back to Sean Tucker with similar plays like that against Wake Forest this weekend. But I think they're going to try to incorporate him more in the passing game as well. If they can't get him in the running game.
Speaking of the passing game, Mike.
Yeah.
We know that Wake Forest is going to basically dare Garrett Schrader to throw the ball. They're going to key in on Sean Tucker, and they're going to say, what you got? Now, when Schrader was allowed to roll out a little more play action, use his feet to throw the football last week, he got comfortable. You could see it. Now, it was a 55-yard touchdown run that opened up the offense, and we know that's what Schrader can do. And by the way, he shook off Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. That's not an easy thing to do, right? So we know he's always a threat and a weapon there. But I feel like if you're going to win a game like Saturday, and Mike and I split in terms of our predictions, we'll get to that coming up, you got to throw the ball. But when they did go a little bit more to the rollouts and that type of thing in the passing game, he looked more comfortable. So I guess the challenge against Wake Forest is going to be how early can you establish that? Because it took until the middle of the second quarter to do it last week.
Yeah, one thing about Garrett Schrader, I think he's gaining more and more confidence with each game. I mean, he got his shot first against Albany. It's an FCS level team. So he went 11 for 15, 73%, had an interception. But then you go against Liberty. You have your 6 for 15. It wasn't his best passing performance, but he got through it. And then you go to Florida State and you're 13 of 23, 56%, still not better, but you got 150 yards under your belt passing. I think he's improving, and he's getting more comfortable within the flow of that offense. And once he gets his running game out there, it's like then that opens it up, like you said, in the passing game. So I think the more and more he's in that offense and he's connecting with those receivers, that he'll be able to make an impact with his arm instead of his legs.
Well, we spent a lot of time on the offense, Mike, but as they say, it's defense that wins the games. And this Syracuse defense, while giving up 33 points a week ago, still looks impressive.
Yeah.
That holding call on Marlowe Wax should have been called. It was egregious.
Yeah.
Who knows what happens? Maybe you go to overtime and lose, but I hate when referees decide games like that when they don't do their job, as opposed to, getting, I guess, you err on the side of caution by not calling it, but that was brutal, right? But the player involved in that is the guy I want to focus on, Mike, because we've heard so much about Mikel Jones, and for good reason. The guy is going to be an NFL linebacker, in my opinion. But how about Marlowe Wax? I want to talk about a guy week by week just pops more on that field, around the ball, making big plays. Syracuse is two legit all ACC linebackers developing here, and he's been fun to watch.
Yeah, they're going to give Sam Hartman a lot of trouble this weekend just because they're able to penetrate that offensive line, Marlowe Wax and Mikel Jones, and get to the quarterback. And it's hard to keep them away unless you come up with a holding penalty like it should have been called at the end of last week's game. I mean, John Wildhack, he was on Orange Nation earlier this week, and he said that it was egregious. And they submitted that play along with a couple others to the ACC office for review. Now, we don't know what's going to come from that, but it's typically a good thing to do just to show like, hey, this is unacceptable and it can't happen going forward, especially as we get down the stretch of ACC play. But back to Mikael Jones and Marlo Wax specifically, like Dino Baber said, that there's rare times that Marlo looks at a play. He knows what he's talking about, basically. And I think his impact on his defense is tremendous.
Mike, you brought up Wake Forest, and on Thursdays our predictions go up, and we got a split camp this week. Myself and Nate Mink pick Syracuse. Yeah. You and Chris Carlson pick Wake Forest. And I'm just saying, Mike, there's some national writers out there that agree with Uncle Brent here. We got I saw Bruce Feldman picked Syracuse. I saw oh boy, his name's right on the tip of my tongue, also from The Athletic. I'll think of it in a second here, but he picked Syracuse. Bill Connolly, ESPN, thinks. Now, I don't know if that was for entertainment purposes only or not. Syracuse covering the 7 in terms of winning. But there are some people out there that think Syracuse can win this game. Now, look, it's like the old show, The A-Team. Do you remember The A-Team?
I do not remember The A-Team.
Okay. Look it up on YouTube. It's a tremendous show. And what they said on The A-Team was, I love it when a plan comes together.
I've heard that.
Syracuse is going to beat Wake Forest. There's a number of things that have to happen. You brought up one of them. Got to get pass rush on Sam Hartman. Fluster him. Get him away from the pocket. At least a couple turnovers, right?
Yeah.
Garrett Schrader's got to throw the ball and make plays and continue to run the offense, okay? Someone's going to stop Sean Tucker. I don't know if it's going to be this week, but it's going to happen. You've got to make this a game into the fourth quarter. But, Mike, I feel like if Syracuse is going to win, as I predicted, it's going to be on the back of their defense with the offense making just enough plays in this game. And they've got to establish themselves early and hang in there because, man, Wake Forest, it was a different situation last year. The offensive line was a wreck. You got Jacoby and Morgan in that game against Wake Forest last year. It's like a totally different situation, right? But Wake Forest dominated from start to finish. And this is a unique thing, Mike, because this is the third year in a row that Wake Forest comes to the Carrier Dome. It's one of those quirky scheduling things. Yeah. So if Syracuse is going to make my prediction look good and Bruce Feldman's prediction look good and some of the other national writers out there, then a lot of things have to come together. But weirder things have happened, Mike. The ACC has been upside down this year. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun one for sure. So this is the first of 2 really important, really tough matchups for Syracuse. This week you got a number 19 Wake Forest coming to the Carrier Dome. And next week, it's all about Clemson. And everyone knows how that game gets everyone in the city pretty much riled up and ready to go to the Carrier Dome. But you got to take care of this one first. And I think it'll be tough, man. This is the first ranked opponent that Syracuse will face. And it's against the offense that's putting up at least 35 points a game. They scored 40 plus in their first 2 games, but they not only do they have Sam Hartman, but they got a trio of running backs that you got to look out for. And on any given possession, any given play, they can bust through wide open for a big rushing game. So in those terms, that defense has to be stout. They have to be ready. They have to be prepared for whichever attack that Wake Forest is going to go, whether it's the passing game or the rushing game. Another thing about Wake Forest is they don't make a lot of mistakes. They don't make a lot of mental mistakes. Syracuse had difficulty with the penalty game earlier this season. That's kind of winded down. But if they're able to maintain their composure and not make those mental mistakes, those offsides, those just random face masks. I know Sean Tucker had one of those earlier this year, but yeah, this is a team that doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So it'll be interesting to see if the Loud House can make and force that offense to make some mistakes.
By the way, before I forget, Stuart Mandel was the other writer I was trying to think of there who picked Syracuse to win. Shout out to my guy Alan in the comments here who just says Mr. T. So he remembers the A-team. Okay, my man. Rob says a week ago we saw a different, inspired, and improved Florida State team that was not the same Florida State team that Wake Forest rocked a few weeks ago. And on that note, Rob, I feel like Syracuse is different too. I feel like, yeah, they lost that Florida State game, but in that there's some confidence there. I feel like they stepped forward from even the Rutgers loss. But Mike, boy, there is a big, big difference if you're Syracuse between winning this game, going into Clemson 4-2, losing this game. Now you're 3-3, and Clemson essentially becomes a must win. And here we are kind of flipping the script because Wake Forest is the undefeated first place team. And Clemson's just another team in the ACC this year. That sounds weird because it's Clemson, but they kind of are, right? They've been struggling mightily on offense. Boston College almost beats them last week. Like, this is not the typical heavyweight champ coming in to the Dome next week, but that's the Friday night game. And as you said, the name brand people will get associated with. And you brought up something a moment ago that I'm curious to see how it plays out Saturday, Mike, the crowd. And shout out to the students.
Yeah.
The students have shown up and they have been great this year. I thought after the Rutgers game, they would just kind of like find other stuff to do on Saturdays because I've seen that plenty of times around here, Mike, where students go to that first game and Syracuse loses. They're like, oh, well, forget you. But they've been great. And no matter what the size of the crowd is, it feels like the students are kind of, really pumping things up and leading the charge. So shout out to Otto's Army. They've been doing a great job.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Brent, this is my first real football season inside the Carrier Dome for games. And every time that the defense either makes a play or you see Deuce Chestnut make a big tackle or interception, they're yelling out, dude. I think that's pretty cool. And it's kind of taking a life of its own. So if that fan base is able to be energetic, if they're able to be loud enough to influence that Wake Forest offense when they're on the field, it can make a lot of a difference.
One thing that I'm really curious about this week, and I talked to Dino Babers about this, and he mentioned it in his press conference, but in getting an update today, I didn't get an update, if you will. Yeah. James Williams. I mean, look, the punter this has been punter you, Mike, for the past, decade or so with the number of great punters that have come through. We have seen what it means and how you really take it for granted when you don't have an established punter out there. And James Williams is still a young player that's trying to establish himself, but clearly has the talent, the leg strength, a highly targeted player that Syracuse wanted at that position, right? So his status is up in the air for Saturday. We'll see if he's out there. I did not travel last week to Florida State, but Ian Hawkins comes in, a walk-on from San Diego. It was just given the opportunity to compete for this. Colby Barkley, I believe, is the other name. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Mike. But if anything, special teams is important. It can swing games. You got to flip the field when the offense is not executing, and you don't want that to be the intangible that swings things Wake Forest way if you're Syracuse.
Yeah, it was interesting. Him coming in just kind of off the street, so to say, but him coming in and that being his first game and in that Florida State environment, it's enough to rattle anyone. He didn't perform necessarily terrible. He didn't perform necessarily really good either, but
Dino said he was okay. That about describes it. Yeah.
Okay. He had one punt that didn't look, I think it only traveled 10 yards maybe. But I think just being in the Carrier Dome and being around that fan base, being around that support, around people he knows, I think that'll energize him. I think he'll be maybe more prepared this week than he was last week, and getting a knock on the door from Dino saying, hey, we're getting on a flight in a couple of days.
That is a big, big difference, right? Because you're scrambling, you don't think you're traveling, you're packing to go down, you got a lot on your mind. Yeah. He knows he could play this week. He's at home, a little more calm, probably, trying to avoid that punt you brought up, the little shank off the side of the foot, which, look, we've all been there, right? When you're playing football out in the yard or something. I still, in my backyard, one of my dog's favorite toys is a football. And if I try and punt the ball, 4 out of 10 times, that's what happens. It's that little shank off the side of the foot. But we'll see if special teams is a factor. Nick Skyba is the best kicker in the country.
Yeah.
Andre Schmidt has been the best kicker in the country, but it's been just a little off this year. He's missed a couple of kicks, missed an extra point. Not quite at that Lou Groza Award level. I'll still take Andre Schmidt over a number of kickers in college football, frankly. But If this comes down to a kick at the end, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that goes because both teams at least have a lot of confidence in who's doing it.
Yeah, for sure. At like the last 2 games for Syracuse, they beat Liberty on a game-winning field goal, and they lost to Florida State on a game-winning field goal. It'll be interesting if this week comes down to another field goal.
So, Mike, you've got Wake Forest. I've got Syracuse. We'll see how it plays out, but one thing's for sure, we'll have full coverage for you coming up on Saturday throughout the day. Look for coverage from Mike and Chris and Nate and myself throughout the day and through the weekend as well. It's going to be an interesting game. Wake Forest, then Clemson, back-to-back home games, an important stretch for Syracuse here. And, boy, it doesn't get bigger than this in terms of if they can pick up at least split the next 2 and show people they're going to hang in here and be in contention for at least being in the conversation for a bowl game, Mike. You know, the is it basketball season question gets kicked down the road a little bit further. So if I'm right about my prediction, then it's not quite basketball season yet. How about that?
All you need is 6 wins. And even if you lose the next 2, I think they still got a pretty good shot to get that bowl game.
In the ACC this year, anything is possible. That's for sure. Well, thanks for watching. If you were with us live here today on Orange Weekly, or if you're watching later on YouTube, don't forget that this airs live Thursdays on Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube, on our Facebook page as well. Look for the YouTube clip on syracuse.com, on our SYR football Twitter account, or the places that you find the YouTube clip from the show. Michael, thank you. This will not be the last time we have you on this year, but thanks for popping on the first time this year. We'll see you soon.
No problem. See you, everyone.
See you, everyone. Thanks for watching.